Ticker symbol FDVV, or the Fidelity High Dividend ETF, is a super high quality dividend growth style ETF that offers massive growth potential, a nice decent starting yield, and also a basket of holdings that I think might be one of the best top 10 holdings, and this is across the entire dividend growth ETF selection. Now, even though this ETF doesn't necessarily get as much praise in the dividend growth investing community, this ETF basically offers everything any dividend growth investor would want. Not to mention, this ETF over multiple different time frames has even outperformed SCHD, which I'm going to share with you guys here later. Now, in this video, I want to dig into the Fidelity High Dividend ETF, share with you guys what this ETF is, how it works, the performance of the ETF, and also, of course, what I think of it. Then later on, I'm going to compare this ETF to other high quality dividend growth ETFs just to prove that this ETF is nothing to be messed with. So if you're a dividend investor, I recommend you stick around until the end and learn a little bit more about this super high quality ETF. If you're ready for all that, make sure to drop a like down below, subscribe, and let's get right into it. If you are a dividend investor who wants to level up your portfolio, you need to be tracking your dividend income consistently. And that's why I created the perfect dividend tracker that I've used to scale my dividend income up to all-time highs over the last year. Now, along with this dividend tracker, you're also going to receive my A to Z dividend investing ebook, which shows you how I personally started from $0 several years ago to now where I earn over $7,500 per month in dividends. So if you want this tracker and the ebook, go to the first link down below in my description and grab it today. Now, before we go through some of the actual numbers and everything else, going over the basic objective for FDVV, it's its objective to provide investment returns that correspond before fees and expenses generally to the performance of the Fidelity High Dividend Index. The strategy says normally invest at least 80% of assets in securities included in the Fidelity High Dividend Index and in depository receipts representing securities included in the index. It may lend securities to earn extra income for the fund also. The index description. The Fidelity High Dividend Index is designed to reflect the performance of stocks of large and mid-capitalization dividend-paying companies that are expected to continue to pay and grow their dividends, which again, like I was saying, is basically what all of us dividend growth investors are looking for. Now, if you look at some of the performance metrics when it comes to FDVV, looking at the last 5 or so years, we're talking like 14%, 15% per year, which not only is good, but also even better than a lot of the other high-quality dividend growth ETFs we talk about. Not only that, this ETF offers almost a 3% trailing 12-month dividend yield, which is higher than that of DGRO, VIG, and lots of the other high-quality dividend growth ETFs, which might or might not mean something to you. I mean, some of us dividend investors are a little bit more focused on a little bit more cash flow, and some of you guys probably don't care. But for those of you guys that are focused on around 3%, 4% starting yield, this ETF offers it. This ETF has around 107 different holdings inside the ETF, so it's not littered with hundreds and hundreds of different shares of different companies. And I'm going to share with you guys the diversification and top 10 holdings as of right now. The top 10 names are names like Nvidia, which makes up around 6.6% of the ETF, then a ton of Apple, Microsoft, Broadcom, Target Resources Corp, Procter & Gamble, Philip Morris, ExxonMobil, Kinder Morgan, Ultra Group, and others. Now, this ETF sort of offers a cool balance between super growth potential, tech-focused single stocks like Nvidia and Apple, for example, but also offers some massive dividend income from day one from names like Ultra Group, ExxonMobil, or even names like Philip Morris. Now, this is sort of a unique blend of different dividend payers and also growth monsters all in one single ETF, which I honestly love. Now, as far as the holding breakdown, as far as sectors go, this ETF is going to offer you a majority of technology. Now, I've said this before and I'll say it again. If you're an investor that wants some more growth potential, if you're okay with a little bit higher beta, then you're probably going to want something that offers more tech exposure. But if you're someone like myself that doesn't really want that high beta, that's sort of more slow and steady, set it and forget it, then technology exposure can be somewhat troublesome. Now, the next biggest portion of FDVV is things like industrials, consumer defensive, energy, utilities, and then we have some real estate in here, which SCHD does not have. We have financials, we have healthcare, consumer cyclical, and communication. Now, again, for dividend growth investors that want growth potential and also want income and want more and more in income over time, which is basically what most dividend growth investors want, this ETF is sort of hitting it from all angles and going to offer you almost everything. Now, as far as price return goes for FDVV, over the past 9 or so years, this ETF has basically doubled in price, but along with that, it's offered some nice sized income every single quarter to investors. The ETF does have an expense ratio of 0.16%, so it is much more expensive than that of SCHD, but to be real here, it's still pretty low cost. Now, as far as the actual dividend, this is what's really interesting about FDVV. It does offer just around a 3% starting yield. But the interesting thing about FDVV is that the dividend growth isn't necessarily super apparent. I mean, over different time frames, the dividends have went up. And just as of recently, the 48-cent dividend that we saw in December was pretty massive compared to the previous 42-cent dividend. But as you can see right here, a few years back, the March dividend for FDVV was 50 cents per share. Now overall, it does look like things are going up and to the right, maybe slowly, but there isn't much massive dividend growth with this one. Now I know what you're probably thinking, well, because FDVV does offer so much exposure to things like technology, and I mean heck, the top few holdings alone, Microsoft, Apple, and Nvidia, this ETF probably has grown a lot as far as price return goes. And if you're thinking that, you'd be exactly right. This ETF's lack of dividend growth has been made up for with the amount of growth some of the top holdings have offered. Now before I go through and share with you guys the actual comparison side to side, comparing SCHD to FDVV, because I find it very interesting, considering a lot of investors like myself that own a ton of SCHD probably also like FDVV. Looking at the breakdown as far as sectors go for SCHD and the top 10 holdings, now I can't speak for all of us, but I would say the top 10 holdings in FDVV are probably a little bit more flashy and a little bit better. Not to say that a lot of these different holdings haven't paid dividends and offered dividend growth historically, but names like Verizon stock or even names like Pfizer, there's some names that have lagged a lot over the past several years. Now also, if you look at SCHD's top sectors, it only has around 10% technology, where remember FDVV has around 27%. So it really goes back to the point I've made on previous videos. You have to find what ETF matches what you're looking for, and that being what underlying sectors and of course top 10 and the rest of the holdings are within that ETF. Because some people are going to want more technology exposure, and some of us might want a little bit more financial exposure, for example. But regardless, this sort of brings me back to the start of this video, and the main reason I want to make this video is because for myself, doing some dividend research as of recently, I once again brought up FDVV because this is a very, very small holding in my long-term portfolio. I think I literally have like 2 or 4 shares just as a starter position, and I want to grow it more in the future. But it got me thinking, how well has FDVV done now since inception, and especially comparing it to my personal favorite SCHD. Now over the past 8.33 years, with a $10,000 investment and dividends being reinvested all on the way, FDVV, for example, has offered around 163.16% total return, where SCHD has offered around 155.56%. Now this averages out per year around 12.32% versus 11.93%. Now I'm not saying that SCHD has done bad over the last 8.33 years, but I am saying for how much credit and how much stardom SCHD gets, it's kind of crazy that there is an ETF that offers a lot of similar aspects, FDVV, that not only offers diversification growth and a nice sized dividend, but also has even outperformed SCHD slightly over this time frame. Now going back to the idea of you should invest into whatever works for you and makes sense for you. For me personally, I like the fact that, as you can see right here, SCHD's dividends have consistently grown over the past 10, 12, 13 or so years, which is very important for me specifically as an investor that wants to use my dividends in the future to pay for things like bills, etc. Now just because SCHD has outperformed FDVV as far as dividend growth goes, I made it very apparent that the Fidelity High Dividend ETF has actually outperformed SCHD on a total return basis over the past 8+ years. But just because I specifically am very focused on dividend income and dividend growth, because I do want to use my dividends to pay for things like bills and keep up with inflation in the future, I'm not looking to sell off my positions in my portfolio. I'm not looking to do the 4% rule or anything of the sorts. SCHD and other ETFs like this one that have offered consistent dividend growth over time are more or less what I'm looking for. Now, all that to say that I personally do already have a position of FDVV inside my portfolio as it sits right now, and I do intend to build out this position further in the future. And if not anything else, I really recommend all of you guys, especially you dividend growth investors, look a little bit deeper into this one, because I promise you, you're probably going to like what you see. So now that we talked about FDVV, I share with you guys what the Fidelity High Dividend ETF is, how this ETF works, its performance, and even how it stacks up next to SCHD. All right, lastly, I want to hear from you guys down below. When it comes to FDVV, is this something that's inside your portfolio? Would you buy it? Yes or no? Let me know in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.